So welcome back to Twist of Fate, a small business podcast. My name is Doug Younger. I'm the host, and this podcast is dedicated for you to inspire you to find your own twist of fate. That fateful moment when you go from thinking about being a business owner, hypothetically, to actually pursuing your dreams and making them reality. Today, we're sitting down with a special friend of mine, the CEO and co-founder of Credder. Chase, welcome to Twist of Fate, my friend.
Thanks, man. Been great to see the offices and be here today.
So Chase, tell me more about how you're going to keep news honest through Credder. Tell me more about what you do at Credder.
So we started Credder back in 2016, really, under a different name, but formally launched in 2018. And the real thing that we're doing here is trying to give news consumers, online news consumers, a powerful voice to hold media accountable, but also kind of a communication layer where those authors and outlets can receive that feedback in the form of article reviews and actually iterate on why they're losing or gaining trust from their audiences. So the biggest problem we see in news today is that there's basically a lack of dialogue between news consumers and news producers are working on behalf of advertisers instead of the best interests of the general public.
I completely agree. So your view in some way is that you can generate a critic review or essentially that a journalists or respected individuals in news would give their opinion if an article or news is sourced properly.
What we're really trying to get to is just the quality of the reporting, and we break it down into two different categories, kind of like Rotten Tomatoes does with their critic and audience score.
Yeah.
So we have a critic score where verified journalists are rating articles, and then the public score.
Who's a verified journalist?
So there's really two ways that we determine that. There's if you go to credder.com, you'll see critic requirements. There's some basic guidelines, but basically they just need to be actively reporting and creating stories today and not just be kind of on the sidelines. They need to actively be participating for predominantly a major news outlet, not some niche outlet or niche kind of topic. And then we also do pull journalist reviews from Twitter. So when journalists on Twitter with their verified badge tweet about an article, we can actually aggregate that into our system as well.
Awesome. And they are not compensated to be a verified journalist?
Not yet, but we are always looking at kind of interesting ways that we can create a financial incentive for the reviewer community, both verified journalists and the general public, to participate and be rewarded for their contributions.
Awesome. That was one of my questions. And I think a lot of my listeners will also want to know a little bit more, like you said. The comparison to Rotten Tomatoes is clear, right? It's super clear. The audience scoring. So the public can score news as well. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So when I review articles on Credder, I'm not a verified journalist. Even if I, am deep in this space, I wouldn't consider myself a journalist. So I review under the public category, which is accessible to anybody. Right now, we are only for English written content, but eventually we'll branch out into other languages and other mediums like podcasts and stuff. But basically anyone online can create a free account on Credder, and now they can review any article that they come across online, and they review it for the quality of the reporting, and they can leave specific tags, like if they found a logical fallacy in the article, they could tag a specific fallacy to that article so that the next readers who are thinking about reading that article or just landed on it, they can actually see, kind of benefit from the feedback of their fellow news consumers before deciding whether to engage with it or not.
I actually think it's a huge unmet need that you're filling here. Especially you mentioned back to 16 to now. Like from that timeline, I mean, myself personally, living in America, so many interesting news things have happened. Is there one in particular that stands out to you as an example of like Credder kind of finding, oh, this is not real, or this is kind of bogus? Is there one that stands out most?
I would say there's two kind of things that have happened since 2016 that made Credder more relevant than ever. The first, whether we like the term or not, which at Credder we actually don't like the term that much, but the term fake news has definitely gone mainstream with the help of people like Donald Trump, who was president when he was, touting that phrase pretty often. And, for better or worse, he was getting
in some ways he was right, and in some ways he's not, right?
For sure there's a problem, and, how to address the problem, that's what we can talk about. How to frame the problem, sure. But for sure, people inherently understood what he was referring to, that the quality of online reporting has been declining and pretty rapidly. It seems like a kind of a race to the bottom for publishers chasing after clicks and sensational headlines.
Clickbait. Yeah, clickbait. For sure.
Yeah, clickbait is a problem because that's kind of the bread and butter of revenue for publishers now. The other is COVID. I mean, as we've seen, information, misinformation, disinformation, when it's also coupled with a virus or a pandemic, it kind of becomes life and death. So kind of the quality of information and reporting and asking questions, that becomes really important when there's a health crisis.
Obviously in the podcast medium, like misinformation is a concern when it's related to public health, right? Like, I mean, the news stories that get politicized versus, hey, it's science. Like, we got to protect ourselves. I think there's a huge need for what Credder does. In fact, I was going to ask you, so like, I can't help it, but, we've heard about different terms, the big lie, or, that the election was faked, or that stop the steal, I think is a phrase or something like that. I mean, I feel like whether you're on the left or the right sides of the lines, the truth is we don't have an objective measure whether news is real or not. Or it's so easily to say that this is madness or conspiracy theory. So I think it's a real interesting space that Credder is in, because going beyond Rotten Tomatoes, that model works for film and movies. And yes, the system can be manipulated, but it's still a barometer of something. Whereas for news, I don't think we have that.
Yeah, I mean, what we're doing at Credder is basically just taking the online reviews methodology that we've seen work, for better or worse, but creates accountability in movies with Rotten Tomatoes, hotel chains with TripAdvisor, businesses with Yelp. I mean, everybody has their own little complaints, but at the end of the day, people do rely on these services to hold these businesses and industries accountable and make smarter decisions with their time and purchasing decisions. And so we're just taking this online reviews methodology and applying it to actually the most distrusted industry in the world today, which is online news. And our thesis is that trust in the digital age is built in aggregate by being able to transparently see the feedback of your fellow consumers.
Sure.
No censorship necessary. And so, like kind of what you were getting to with the big lie and all these other things, how do we address these big issues of conspiracy theories or just outright lies in media? Well, we kind of think about it from first principles. So you can either try to censor content, which we don't believe in. I actually have a background as a co-host of Project Censored for a few years.
In your background. Tell us about that, man.
So when we were first starting Credder, I developed a very close relationship with Mickey Huff, the president and director of Project Censored and the Media Freedom Foundation. They took a huge interest in what we're doing because there's a lot of parallels. They're a nonprofit, nonpartisan media watchdog, and so as Credder is almost like a watchdog technology that is enabling the public to become watchdogs, so kind of watchdogs at scale. And so yeah, there was a lot of cross-promotion collaboration there, and I was co-hosting with him for a couple of years, doing that before we launched the Credder podcast, where I kind of spun out.
If you don't mind me asking, you felt there was a gap from a technology standpoint at that time when you were working on this?
Well,
is that kind of like the test bed where you were kind of like, I'm thinking about this?
No, because I think I wouldn't have gotten the role at Project Censored unless I was already actively working on the project. So at that point, I already had kind of an initial product with my team to show, some early traction, and we were already very much taking ourselves seriously, so that Mickey Huff and the Project Censored team could take us seriously as well at that time. So no, we were already into the swing of things, building Credder, when we made those contacts.
There's a lot of my listeners are business people or aspiring business people. So tell me more about the business behind Credder. I know that you recently have launched this enterprise API. So how does monetization work for you, and how you're going to generate value for your business?
Yeah, it was something that we struggled to think about it in the early days because we didn't want to necessarily rely on advertising, but a lot of other review platforms do rely on advertising, like Yelp, for example. The businesses can pay to have themselves show up higher in search results. Rotten Tomatoes, there's a lot of kind of promotion of the upcoming movie release and stuff on their website. So we see advertising not as bad or necessarily evil, but definitely as part of the problem and why we're having a decline in journalism. So we wanted to try to develop a revenue model that didn't rely on that. And so what we're doing is pretty new and does take a lot of education. But what we're doing is we're taking the data on the credibility of all this content and sources at scale, and we're actually licensing that data or access to our database of kind of constantly improving in scale and volume and accuracy, this database of online reviews. And we're licensing that out to the platforms, the third parties like social media, search engines, web browsers, news aggregators, and the world of programmatic advertising to help them address content credibility, because they're actually coming under increasing pressure from not just their own users and the media, but also regulators who are constantly discussing things like Section 230. There's a lot of pressure on these businesses to address content credibility, but they don't want to make the editorial decisions themselves because not only is it time-consuming and difficult, but it does put their kind of platform status at risk and start to make them look a lot more like a publisher, which comes with a lot of different liability. So what we're offering them with this enterprise license is basically a monthly recurring licensing fee for unlimited access to our database, which allows them to prioritize and rank content within their own products and services, but also display Credder scores, embed our review form into their own content, get all that audience trust and analytics fed back to them. So just anything to do with better understanding their audience or where they're gaining or losing trust.
So if we're going to understand your target customer, who you're looking to target with this enterprise API, you're looking at more of like the browser providers or SaaS like
agnostic platforms. So we are going to be launching later this year a publisher-focused product, but we're specifically right now targeting agnostic platforms in the sense that Facebook doesn't just promote the New York Times content. They have content from any number of sources. So they don't really care which content is deemed more credible or not. Because they don't have a built-in incentive. They are not the publisher, so they can show any type of content. That's who we're going after.
So I have to ask this question. Do you feel, in a hypothetical way, is there a way to kind of game the system with Credder? The same way like Rotten Tomatoes? I mean, like, for example, like, we both love movies. We've talked about this, right? And, there's the whole, we're both Matrix fans, right? A full disclosure, we're both crazy Matrix fans. Did you see the Matrix sequel?
Unfortunately I did. Yeah.
No. So look, let me say this. Okay, as a Matrix fan, first of all, the original Matrix, we agree, is transcendent film. Okay, that's one. Yeah. Two, the sequels were not as bad as what everybody said because
no. 1, 2, and 3 were,
smash hit. It's like solid ideas. I will still say this. This Matrix sequel, it still has great ideas. It's just that it did get away from the secret sauce that made the originals big, which, like, I'll say, the martial arts and all that stuff, they kind of like went off of that. Which I get. I mean, look, Keanu Reeves is a certain age. Like, hey, we're all getting old. But there were a lot of problems, I agree. But the reason where I'm going with this is that in some way, when I looked at the Rotten Tomatoes score, very interesting case study looking at that film.
What was it?
There was, the audience score. Okay, first of all, the audience and the critic scores were like not great. But I felt like, looking at a lot of the critics, it's like, I'm saying, did you watch the same film as I? Like, some of them really, really loved it. And I thought the score was a lot higher than I would give it credit that it should. Some of that is, and this is common for Marvel films too. It's like when it first comes out, I almost am like, wow, the reviewers are like on the take or something. Like, why are they rating this that high?
Well, with Marvel in particular, the fans of these comic books will do anything to support them. So the Marvel movies always are like 20% higher than they probably should be.
In this case, I think The Matrix did the same.
Yeah.
But it's still kind of like, in some way, I feel like it's predictable in some way that when a new film comes out on Rotten Tomatoes, I'm not bashing Rotten Tomatoes, I use it all the time, by the way, but I always even know that the score is going to be a lot higher from the critics. And then I'm almost going to watch that audience score maybe a week later or 2 weeks later, and then the truth kind of comes out. Mm-hmm. Now, do you feel in some way Credder could be vulnerable to such things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you're really talking about is when you open up reviewing to the general public, there's going to be a whole different host of incentives for why somebody's reviewing. Somebody might review something well because they are cousins with the, like if you're reviewing a restaurant on Yelp, for example, yes, maybe you actually went to the restaurant and ate there, or maybe it's your cousin's new restaurant and he only had 5 reviews on the business, and so you're helping him out because he asked you for a review. There's never really going to be never going to be a great way for Yelp to determine, did you actually eat there? Did you actually have a 4-star experience? But at the end of the day, the aggregate volume tends to drown these things out. So like you're saying, you're waiting to see a more accurate score because the more reviews there are and the more time that passes, the more accurate it gets. That is what this kind of data play has an advantage, which is also why we aren't fans of kind of the top-down approaches to news ratings, where somebody gives them a score and it's a one-time thing, and then maybe they recheck that score a year later. Every single day, there are new reviews coming on the platform that you might disagree with the way New York Times is rated today, but every day there's new ratings coming on, and the aggregate is what builds the accuracy.
It's not so much that Rotten Tomatoes or even Credder is being gamed, is that the human condition we can game ourselves, because in some ways we're very irrational and illogical at times.
Not only that, but it's an industry, so there is always going to be a financial incentive for something to be reviewed better than something else. So anytime you're reviewing a financial industry, there are financial incentives at play. But we can take steps to mitigate these risks, like verifying one account, one identity. That's something that we'll be doing soon. We have a reviewer rating. So, for example, if you leave a review on Credder for an article, the rest of the community can vote on how helpful or not helpful your review is, and that generates a reviewer score.
I don't think Rotten Tomatoes is doing that.
No, in fact, neither is Yelp. None of these other players are doing that, and that's kind of an additional step that we took.
I think that's an innovative idea.
Yeah. Not only do you get to see the reviewer score next to the reviews, you can kind of make up your own mind on the quality of the reviewer themselves, but we might also eventually have that rating be the weight of that person's review.
If you're going to give a quality news score to an article, you're not using like AI or a bot or anything to generate that score. It's not, it's still, you're using people.
Correct.
Yeah, I think it's human intelligence. There's really only a few ways to address this problem. One is an AI for content credibility, which has its own issues, but at the end of the day,
you're not doing that, least now or yet.
We're not doing that yet because even if you're going to try to do that with AI, you need an enormous amount of training data to train up that AI, which we are positioning our reviews for. But still, somebody had to make that AI, somebody's in control of it, and you don't really see, it's a black box with an AI or machine learning technology. You don't really see what is generating those scores. So the other way is a top-down approach, kind of like you could think of Michelin Guide versus Yelp, where Michelin Guide sends somebody over to your restaurant, you don't necessarily know they're coming, and then they create a rating. That one individual has one experience and they create a rating off of that. Well, we used to trust that more, but now people predominantly use platforms like Yelp when determining where to go instead of the Michelin Guide, because there's a lot more data, a lot more feedback, a lot more accuracy, and a lot more transparency. So really, it's either AI, a top-down rating, or you create a tool that allows the public to voice their feedback. And so we firmly believe in that for the future of the internet.
There is no doubt about it, if you're listening to this conversation with Chase, that he is passionate about this topic, optimistic about this topic. Like
Some days.
you're not cynically like
There's hope.
There's hope, right?
hope.
There's hope. And then third, what I can see, you have a very well planned out business model. And I think this is the goal that I hope for all of my listeners to get to. But I want to hear more about what would inspire you down this path.
I guess in large part it starts from being the son of two serial entrepreneurs. Both my mom and my dad are both, have always worked for themselves, started their own businesses. So I've always kind of played a role inside those businesses from a very young age. You know, when other people go work at a camp or something, I would be helping out with one of my parents' businesses. And then when I went to university,
You were never one of those guys, I want to go work at Google or Apple or for somebody else. That was never in the Rolodex.
I wouldn't hate working for someone else as long as I felt that they were making better decisions than I could make. So, I would go work for a handful of people that I admire and respect. Absolutely. I'd go work for them for free just for the lessons. But I do have a lot of confidence in my own ability to problem solve. And I have worked in companies before where I felt like the manager was, making dumber decisions than I would make. And I've worked from everything from, washing dishes on up. So
Let me ask you this. As a son of two entrepreneurs, it didn't scare you even? Like, that means your mother and father were hard-working people. Like, it's not glamorous like, everybody thinks. Like, everybody thinks it's Elon Musk, Tony Stark. Like, that is the entrepreneur's journey. It's not.
It's definitely not. But at the end of the day, you're either in control of your own life and your own destiny, or you're not. If you're working for someone else, you can feel stable all day, but if they don't hit their numbers or something happens, there's corruption at the top, whatever, you could lose your job even if you've been working there for 20 years.
I can say this personally. Yes, you are right. You are right about that in every way, shape, or form. I think that it's easy when you have I think the concept of stability economically I feel a false sense of security. Mm-hmm. That as an entrepreneur, it's a long, tough road, but you're right. You're in control of your own destiny.
It's the only way, is to be your own business owner. But to be honest, that's not why I started Credder. It's not some selfish interest of being the boss or owning my own business. Although I did go to school for entrepreneurship because I always kind of felt like that was going to be the path, or at least a skill set that was always going to be something useful for me to know.
And that was at Chico, right?
Yeah, so they have an entrepreneurship college. I think they're one of the only colleges in the country at the time that had an entrepreneurship college of business. So purely focused on starting and operating your own businesses from scratch.
And big shout out to the Chase's Chico alum. Yeah. Now, when you were there, you were already thinking entrepreneurship clearly because that was the curriculum. That was the way.
Yeah. No, I mean, from day one growing up under my parents, yes, you see the hard work, but you also see the advantages, them being able to take time off to come to your sports game or something and not have to ask permission of the boss to, come, see you play in a soccer game or something like that. So there's a lot of flexibility that comes with entrepreneurship. But more importantly, it's just like they're in control of their own fate. If they succeed, they get to benefit from the success.
So you went thinking that you were going to be an entrepreneur, but you didn't know what though, right?
Yeah, I wanted to learn the toolkit, and I was in no hurry to find out what, where my passion or the problem were going to meet. I didn't know when that was going to happen or where, in what industry, but I just knew that these are useful skills.
And I think that's common, I would say, amongst the business owners I run into. I get a lot of people say, well, I just need a great idea. And
it helps.
I respond, well, no, I'll tell you what, though. I have a jaded view on that. Okay. Now I'm going to be cynical. Like, I would say I've seen bad ideas succeed.
Yeah, definitely.
With great marketing.
Or great an idea is like 1%, 2%.
Absolutely.
Execution is everything.
Absolutely.
But if you're executing on a great idea, then now you have something
Great
even
things
bigger.
can happen.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, for sure. Okay, so then at what point then do you go into, okay, this is it. News, quality scoring. I'm going to live or die on the sword on it. Like, when did that happen?
So let's see. I left school, graduated, came back home, was helping run the family restaurant in Petaluma, and dealing with Yelp.
Which I can give you rave reviews on.
Thank you.
By the way, if any of you are listening, there is a restaurant. It's named Reese BC in Petaluma. I mean, Chase threw a spread for me and my family. My kids pigged out. I pigged out. That is a fantastic restaurant. Like I really look. Forget like Yelp reviews. I Doug Younger endorse Reese BC. Like it was a great place.
Yeah, at 12 straight Michelin Bib Gourmand. So we're the only restaurant in Sonoma County to ever do that. So it's a serious restaurant and it's a thriving business. But I was dealing with Yelp on a daily basis because I was managing all of the kind of online marketing, online reviews, all of the digital aspects of the business that was falling on me because my
Sorry,
dad,
because that can be very toxic. I'm really sorry about that.
it can be, but you have to learn to distance yourself from it and try to use it as feedback. But definitely reviewers are not always right. The customer is not always right. But there's usually some kernel of truth in there, and it's your job as a business owner to be...
Unless it's a bot.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
these things happen.
Yeah, it is. But the way that Credder came to be is I was very deeply engaged in these review platforms, also a very kind of avid news junkie following news media and this kind of revenue model problem that I understood was going to lead to a decline in journalism. And then I started looking for, is there a Rotten Tomatoes or a Yelp for news consumers? Because yes, now we're all getting our news online. Doesn't that also mean that we can all be kind of working together as we go about gathering our news? Can't we benefit from kind of a crowdsourced wisdom or crowdsourced feedback, whatever you want to refer to it as? And the truth is that not only was there nothing like that out there in 2016, but there was not even a single person talking about that as a solution or even talking about trying to give news consumers some kind of a tool to empower them to hold media accountable. And so the internet actually created the first time where media that used to just be kind of cable news, but now it's online journalism, that media could actually be held accountable. And that we could simultaneously connect all news consumers in real time and arm them with this information. So nobody was talking about it. I did more digging, 3 weeks of digging, and then when I saw that there was zero efforts in that space, I realized, okay, this is a perfect convergence of platforms that I'm very well aware of, a space that I'm passionate about, a problem that I think needs solving in this particular way, and nobody else is getting after it. So that's when I kind of brought the team together.
So then you had co-founders. So you all got together and said, let's make a company.
Yeah, I said, let's move into a house in Petaluma. Let's work at the restaurant for however long it takes until we build enough product and traction that we can actually raise some angel round of money and become full-time. And so let's take it from side project to full-time. And are you with me? And luckily, those guys are with me. Yeah.
You're telling me you got Austin to work at the restaurant?
So Austin, he didn't work at the restaurant so much as my other co-founder, Jared.
Sure.
Jared and I were full-time at the restaurant, and we'd come home and work on Credder kind of late into the night, like the 9 p.m. to 2 a.m.
To those that don't know, Austin is the chief technology officer.
Yeah. Austin was doing
Smart guy.
Austin was doing like freelance contracting work, so we kind of let him do that to earn his living. But he was also getting paid a little bit, so he was the only cost of the company in the early days was like $2,000 a month to him.
And then was it I mean, when you guys all got together and talked about this, where did you guys go? Like, was it at the restaurant? You guys, the three, like, do you remember? Like, is there a location where you're like, okay, we're doing this?
No, actually, I was also living in Italy for a bit during this time, and so a lot of it was done via Zoom. And so then I moved back once they told me that they were committed to moving into this house together and doing this. I moved back from Italy and we moved into the house together. So it was actually a lot of Zoom calls, and it was just basically saying like, okay, here, between the three of us, we have the three different skill sets that are required to start a business. And do we all agree that a Rotten Tomatoes for news or a Yelp for news consumers, whatever kind of analogy you want to give, do we agree that that is inevitable? And do we agree that there's nothing else in the world right now as a substitute? And once they kind of came to terms with that, we had nothing to do but decide, do you want to go work for someone else right out of college, or do you want to take a swing at the bat?
It's awesome. So then we don't get redos as entrepreneurs, but a lot of times you always reflect and say, if I could do something different, or if I would have did it a different way, maybe it would have worked, or I would have got an outcome I want. So I'm curious, like for Credder, was there, if you could do it all over, what would you do differently?
I would, yeah. Geez, I don't know, because in some ways I feel like the only way we got here was that we turned every corner at the right time, and otherwise, like, there was so many times that we could have died on the way here, where we had to make like the one right decision out of a host of bad decisions to choose from. So on some level, like, I do think if there's parallel universes out there, I'm in one of the few where Credder...
Everything worked out, right?
It worked out. So
Sure.
I can't regret much, but I would say that it would obviously have been better to have been a more recognized person in the space, maybe have had more success earlier in life so that I could go out and raise money right away instead of hustling for those first 2 years. But those... that is where the company is made. That's the foundation, is that hustle and that grit.
I think it builds character.
It's the DNA of the company today. So, yeah, I really can't regret.
This is good that you brought this up, because I actually do feel, we're based here in Silicon Valley. And I feel that level of humbleness that I see from you and humility, I don't always see with a lot of the tech entrepreneurs here. And I think a lot of it did come from the fact that you had the true grit, and your guys had the true grit to get together and say, hey, we're gonna earn our way to success. I mean, I know my company, we built ourselves that way as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm humbled every day as an entrepreneur trying to, tackle one of the biggest problems in the world. Whether people think it's an easy or difficult problem to solve, I can assure you it's a very difficult problem to try to solve, to hold media accountable and kind of unwind this decline in not just news consumer trust, but the rapid acceleration of clickbait and sensationalism in our information diet. So it's a really humbling problem. It's like the analogy of the elephant. Like it takes years just to even understand the problem, I think.
Credder and your story and your team, I mean, in this multiverse, you guys are successful. Like, maybe we can talk a little about that. So I acknowledge that, I mean, you're even an award winner of a lot of different things. And the one thing where you and I met was Capitalize. Mm-hmm. So to those that are listening, there is an NBA Sacramento pitch competition called Capitalize. I had the opportunity to be the official partner of the Kings, but even more, I was the lead judge. And this is how I met Chase, actually. So I was just curious, like, what your experience going through Capitalize was, and kind of how you thought about it. And I think a lot of the people listening may eventually one day go through some type of business plan or pitch competition. It's great to hear from a winner and kind of what your thoughts were there.
It's funny. I kind of joined the competition on a whim. I'd been doing a lot of pitches for our pre-seed raise at the time, and so I figured, you know what, my pitch is pretty tight right now. This is a pitch competition. Let's see what happens. But yeah, meeting you for the first pitch was great.
How did you hear about it? How did you know?
Jeez, I don't remember how I heard about it. Probably from Monique posting something online.
Monique Brown from Growth Factory.
Yeah, from
She's
Growth
great.
Factory.
She's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. It was probably from seeing her on LinkedIn or something like that. And yeah, just doing the pitch competition was useful, even if all I got from it was feedback. but in the end, it went really well, and definitely our business is in a totally different place and positioning in the market now because of it. So very lucky.
Is pitching easy for you? Like, do you get nervous? Do you get stressed out?
I used to get nervous, but I think I know my business and the space so well now that I could kind of talk about it for hours on end, and you know, it's not bullshitting. It's not selling. It's like, I feel like I have a master's degree in, you know, online news reviews right now.
And from Capitalize, did you feel that there was something that you were doing really well that you could kind of tips and tricks for those that are thinking about doing pitch competitions?
I mean, when it comes to pitching, you're really talking about a first impression of a business and a problem solution set. And so the best thing you can do is simplify. So because I'd been working on the pitch for so long, I can take this kind of ambiguous idea of news consumers and critics reviewing online articles, generating scores for articles, authors, and outlets, and how that fits into the future of the media landscape and all that. I was really able to simplify it to its core elements. And in the pitch, when you're pitching a business, it's less about pitching them on the revenue model or the team so much as getting them to understand that what you're building is inevitable and that you are on a path that is taking logical steps to iterate and solve the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, kudos to you. I think you performed very well. And even one comment I can make is, I mean, first of all the CEOs that applied that I got to see, I think I saw the top 8. Really impressive people. I mean, one thing that is clear is across the board, everybody was passionate about it. But I will say that it was very clear to me exactly what you said, that you really had not just a strong understanding of your business model, but you were passionate about it. And I think as a judge, also feels like that whole product market fit is really key. And for me, I mean, I got very patriotic. I felt like our democracy would be better if you succeed. I mean, I can tell you that was one of the strong statements I made with a lot of the other judges, that I said, well, whether you're, again, on the left or right side of the line, bottom line is that the American great experiment is better off with quality news. Yeah. Because if we don't have that, that does lead to conspiracy or radicalism or other pathways that we've seen in the past. And I don't want us to keep making that same mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, a democracy which is based on informed citizenry voting is only as good as the information reaching the citizenry.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, credible news and information is the foundation for any information society or modern society.
Or any good decision making.
Absolutely.
In general.
Absolutely. 100% agree. So product market fit, you nailed it. One last interesting question. So what's this Grizzly Peak Farms? What's that about? Like, what's going on there? Tell me about that.
That is a cannabis company that my dad and I invested in. We were some of the original angel investors back in, I want to say 2017.
That was a long time.
We were looking to invest in cannabis companies back then because we...
Big business. No, that's big booming business right now.
Yeah, and ones that we're supporters of. We were kind of against the long-time criminalization of cannabis, not just as a plant, but also hemp and all the use cases. So there's a really rich history of suppression of this, what we think is just kind of a really magic alien plant that has a million different interesting use cases. And so, yeah, we were looking to support an early cannabis company. Grizzly Peaks came across us among a couple other investment opportunities. And so, yeah, they were one of the first companies in San Diego and Oakland to get their grower's license, which is a huge feat just to get your license and get the space, permitted. So they were some of the first permitted. We had relationships with some of the other angel investors working with them and the owners and operators. And so, yeah, just said, here's here's a company that we can get into early.
Very cool. I mean, I think definitely if anybody's thinking about entrepreneurism, what you'll start to see is you're going to fall in love with that idea that you run with. But then once you're used to or in tune to that train of thought, you're going to see lots of opportunities, other things. Maybe you don't want to live or die on the sword on, but you're going to start seeing them. I kudos to you. It means that you see these other things and you actually decide to invest yourself.
When you understand business, you even if you're learning by understanding your own business, you inherently get a better view on other people's businesses. And so, we've done a lot of investing. My dad and I, we kind of work together on this front, and so we've been early on things like Bitcoin as well. We do some real estate. So
Crypto.
yeah.
Let me ask you this question then.
Okay.
Do you feel there's credible news about crypto? Do you think the general public really understands the truth behind crypto and what it is and all that?
No, because I think just the fact that, well, I guess it depends. If your crypto incorporates a lot, if you're talking about Bitcoin as kind of the letterhead, then no, because most people still refer to it as a cryptocurrency, whereas I would say that it's actually more of a crypto asset or crypto property. And so the fact that people think of it as a cryptocurrency and then they think of currency as something that they use to pay for goods and services every day, they say, oh, Bitcoin is not actually a good cryptocurrency because nobody I know is actually buying goods or services with it. So that's kind of, unfortunately, the level of dialogue with it. But there are a lot of new publishers coming out, like Bitcoin Magazine and Cointelegraph and a whole host of other publishers that are coming out and just focusing on this market and becoming really big brands today by taking the topic seriously and actually not reporting on other news and just focusing on this emerging space. So there are some really good players emerging, but if you're looking to mainstream media, it's still mostly just a conversation about price movement.
So Chase, if any of my listeners are interested in finding credible news, where do they go? Where can they find you?
So first off, Credder and myself will never tell news consumers where they should go, where they can or can't go, and who is the most credible. What we built is review tools where everybody can kind of see and decide for themselves and let the best rise to the top. So, but if you want to, engage with the tool itself or see the scores for all these different articles, authors, and outlets that you experience on a daily basis, you can go to credder.com. That's CREDDER.com. And if you're a business, a platform business, a programmatic advertiser, or a publisher that wants to better understand where you're gaining or losing audience trust or how to quickly kind of integrate an easy-to-use API that'll instantly prioritize credible content and sources within your own products, then you can go to enterprise.credder.com.
But you also are a podcast host yourself. So if they want to join the discussion on credible news and kind of like this dialogue today, which I'm sure is going to be interesting for anybody out there, whether you're a business owner or not, where can they learn more and join the discussion?
Yeah, so you can follow the Credder podcast, again, CREDDER.com, not .com, but the Credder podcast on YouTube for the video form, or Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts, and that's where I have deep dive discussions with the biggest leaders working at the intersection of media and technology. So, we've had on great folks like Craig Newmark, the founder of Craigslist, the founder of Rotten Tomatoes, the owner of Grindr, the founders of Brave, basically any interesting media or technology business today. Those leaders sit down with me for a deep dive and we talk through all these issues.
And for Credder, you're raising funds at this time, correct?
Yeah, we're in the middle of our pre-seed financing, so we're almost done with that, but depending on when this podcast come out, it will probably be about to close. But yeah, we're raising what is our third round of financing, and this is the capital that is actually going to take our business from what was more of like a research and development and kind of product building company and transitioning us into more of a sales and marketing machine as we start to license this database.
I applaud your efforts on that front. And once you move into entrepreneurism, you will forever be fundraising. Just get used to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Just right. And that's your experience.
The number one skill set a CEO, maybe not the other founders, like the technical founder doesn't need to be learning that, but yeah, the number one skill set is fundraising. And to fundraise well, you're really talking about a whole host of other skill sets like sales, design, the pitch deck, having proper design matters, all the different pieces that come together, communication skills. So, yeah.
And then how can my listeners get in touch with you?
So I'm very reachable. You can email me at chase@credder.com. I'm on Twitter at Chase Palmieri. You can find me on LinkedIn, again, Chase Palmieri. I'm always talking to our community of users, interested investors, interested platforms that want to partner with us and use the enterprise API, publishers who are trying to gain insights into why why they or the industry as a whole is losing news consumers' trust. So yeah, I'm an open book.
That's awesome. And look, thanks for coming on this podcast. I also, full disclosure, thank you for being a client of 3 Steps Forward. I think you're an inspiration. I agree. You're probably one of the strongest pitch people I've seen. And I really look forward to working with you in the future. I also would love to check out the Credder podcast. And we could talk a little bit more about these topics. I mean, it's great stuff. It's just awesome stuff. So thank you, man, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, man.
Okay, to my listeners out there, this is another great episode of Twist of Fate where Chase shared with us his inspiration. And I encourage you to find your own inspiration and create your own Twist of Fate moment, pun intended. You have a great afternoon, day, morning, in trying to find your business and make your dreams reality. Thanks.
Twist of Fate is hosted by Doug Younger. It's produced by John Lundvid and Matthew Brown at Ezo Creative. Melanie Filardo schedules our guests. Moni Yu designs our graphics, and Enrique Pimentel manages our digital life. Our theme music is by Jamie Bathgate. Special thanks to all of our patrons. You can support the show by visiting patreon.com/twistoffate podcast. Thanks for listening.